Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to join us for this 8th episode on our podcast on Tuesdays Against Executions. This is Antonietta Elia with you, and today I'm delighted to introduce, I can say, a very engaged from so long time person against death penalty and an activist since early 90s to abolish the death penalty, and he is the director of death penalty action. And he's Mr. Abraham Bonowitz, who is connected from the United States today. But let me say that his work, it is not his level of engagement. His work against death penalty and arbitrary execution is not just limited to the United States and New Jersey, but is globally. So he started in 1989, just to see how hard it is to stop that atrocity all around the world, and especially in Iran. So before to give the floor to Mr. Bonowitz, I'm immensely grateful to have you today and to have accepted the invitation. I would like to underline that today the prisoners in Iran are involved into the movement Tuesdays Against the Execution are now based in 50 different prisons, because this week also the Dadesh prison joined the movement. So you see that there is no corner in Iran, no prison in Iran where executions are not in place, or the situation could be considered better than in other places in the country. So that said, I'm happy to give the floor to Mr. Abraham Bonowitz. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful for the invitation and honored, and perhaps a little bit also I feel shy about this, because I feel very much like I wish I'd been able to do more about what's happening in Iran. As you know, it's very difficult, especially when the United States government is totally not friendly with the government of Iran. And, I came into this work through Amnesty International and have been involved and a member of that organization, this entire time. That's how I started doing this in the late 1980s. And so, of course, I've been familiar with the human rights violations and concerns about what's happening with executions in Iran for all of this time. And you have to wonder, what can I possibly do beyond trying to shine a spotlight on that? And then more recently, when the more recent uprisings and the more recent spike in executions began a couple of years ago, it seems like it's 2.5 years ago now, when there were demonstrations happening all over the United States, and I'm sure all over the world, about what was happening in Iran. I actually met leadership in the Iranian community here in Columbus, Ohio, where I live, and we've actually become friends. We have been to each other's homes, and we go out to eat regularly, and we enjoy being together. And on top of that, in my work, over these years, I've also become friends with other people that are Iranian from where they were born who are doing work on human rights in the United States, in Washington D.C. now. But he started as a student activist and shared with us his experience just walking down the street in Tehran and turning a corner and seeing a public hanging happening, and how that has become a motivation for him on this issue. And it's been decades now. But ultimately, where I started getting focused on the Iran situation was every other year at the United Nations, there's a resolution about calling for a moratorium on executions. And and that's the focus that we have had, is trying to get the United States to vote for that resolution. Our organization was started, Death Penalty Action was started in 2017 when Donald Trump was inaugurated, because we knew there would be executions under the federal death penalty law. So in the United States, we have the death penalty under state laws. 23 states do not have the death penalty, but that means that 27 states do. And most don't use it. Most have very few people on death row. There's a handful of states that are carrying out executions. Although that's growing a little bit, states that haven't executed in a while are starting, but it's nothing like Iran. And what's happening there, where you've got dozens of executions some weeks, and for all kinds of crimes, political and regular criminal kinds of offenses. So far in the United States, there's some politics involved in some of these cases, especially if the victim was a person that's very prominent. It's not the same kind of politics. People aren't being executed because of their beliefs necessarily, but more because of their identity, and because the politicians, the elected officials who are in charge of prosecuting cases or who are in policymaking positions, they want to appear to be tough on crime, and therefore, they will promote the death penalty or even try to seek it in certain cases where the victim is a person of prominence or it's a very famous crime. So, that's how it becomes political here. But at the end of the day, for the people that are facing execution, that have to get killed, that are going to be killed, that are waiting to be killed, and for their families, I can imagine that it's actually very similar, the situations, because when it comes down to it, when you are sitting there thinking they're coming to get me in an hour or tomorrow to kill me, that transcends international boundaries.
Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt you, but thank you very much for this really impactful introduction note and this sort of overview of the situation. So sure. My question is, because of your experience and what you say, I have two questions. The first one, how do you feel in the United States especially, and then outside the US, the situation of execution along of the time? So since early 90s, until now, do you think that the situation is going worse, or we are assisting any kind of limitation in some way by the state and the federal authorities in the United States and outside in other states? And the other point is in relation to families, because and I returned to Iran, that just less than 1 month ago, we lost two prisoners, two more prisoners in Iran, and we were fighting during months with an international campaigns. So they were executed in silence, with no information to the families. So families well informed very late after the execution, with no access to the body of their beloved member of the family. So what is the situation there? So in
in the United States,
the support to the families.
well, every state is different. And by that, I mean, today is Tuesday. And by the way, I've begun trying to fast on Tuesdays when I remember to do so. But because it's an important solidarity opportunity to be thinking about that. And we actually do a 4 days of fasting in front of the United States Supreme Court every summer from June 29th to July 2nd. We just did our 32nd one. So that's an important tactic for people just to be personally engaged on this issue. I wanted to say that. The death penalty in the United States is there's two ways to look at it. It's how much are we using it in terms of to prosecute people and to put more people on death row to face execution, and that is trending downward over the last few decades. We're still on a consistently lower pace of prosecuting people with death penalties, seeking the death penalty. Fewer capital indictments where they decide they're going to seek a death penalty, and then fewer new death sentences. And up until this year, fewer executions. But this year, in the first half of the year, in the first 6 months, we executed as many people as we executed in all of 2024. And we're now on a path to, I think we've executed 28 people so far this year. We're going to get to somewhere between 35 and 45 executions this year. And that'll be the most in the United States since 2013 or 2012, depending on how many people they end up executing. And again, every state is a little bit different. In some states, it requires a 90-day notice before, from the time that you set the date until the point of execution. And then in other states, like in Georgia or Florida, you might get 2 weeks or 3 weeks notice. And right now in Florida, we have a governor who has decided he's got dozens of people who have exhausted all of their legal appeals. They have no more legal avenues, presumably. So they're setting an execution date, a new one, every 2 to 3 weeks, and that's what we're seeing right now. Today, there's 2 people with set execution dates in Florida. One is going to be this Thursday. Well, we just had an execution in Florida a week ago today. There's another one 2 days from now, so 9 days apart. And then there's another one set in a few more weeks in mid-September. And we can expect that they're going to set more dates every 2 to 3 weeks through the end of the year, just in Florida. Okay. And every state's a little bit different. In Ohio, where I live, we have over 30 people with set execution dates, but a governor who is a consistently pro-life Catholic, and therefore, when he was the attorney general, he did his job and tried to move executions along. But as governor, he has stopped all the executions. And I don't think we're going to have any in Ohio until we have a new governor. And maybe if this governor, before he leaves, he can take everybody off the death row. We'll see what happens. And then every state's a little bit different also in how you can visit. In some states, you can have a contact visit where the family can actually touch the prisoner and have a hug and that sort of thing. And in other states, it's behind glass. And if there's a problem, for example, there was a man in Florida a month or two ago who, because he could no longer walk, he would need a wheelchair to get to the visiting room, and they refused to give him one. So he could not have any final visits with his lawyers or his family. It's outrageous. And and I think that's a little bit different though, than because often they can have phone calls or communicate by email, and I'm sure that's not the case in most situations in Iran. And Iran is, I mean, there are places where it's also even more torturous, and for that I would give the example of Japan, where you don't know if it's your execution day until the day of, and they come and tell you, "Come on, let's go." And you get an hour or two to write some final notes, but they don't tell your family until it's time to come pick up the body. So every
So,
place is a little bit different, and it's terrifying. But this is,
yeah,
I'll stop here.
in some way, sorry to interrupt again, but I quite shocked hearing you about the information and I appreciate all the information you are giving us, but really impactful from my point of view. So what I think is that in the case of the United States, it is because we are in a democracy. You said previously, if I'm right, that there is a kind of process of transformation in some way inside the country, right? So, and as you rightly said, also every state acts in different way. In the case of the United States, both at federal level and the level of federate states, and in the case of Iran, we are assisting uh, to the total cancellation of any form of opposition, the transform any kind of difference among crimes, and in some way, uh, perhaps if I can say the positive things is that uh, at, at least until a certain point in the United States, you still have a procedure of review, you still have a mechanism of access to a lawyer, and so on. This is totally absent in Iran.
Yeah.
This is totally absent. So the unjust detention starts just at the unfair trial start at the first moment of the detention, at the same moment of the detention. So, and in fact, this allowed me to make reference again this week to Sharifeh Mohammadi, who has been she has been recently confirmed sentenced to death penalty again in a very short time, by the Supreme Court, with no access to a lawyer, any kind of evidence, any definition of accusation, of charges over her. So you see, this is the basic difference at the moment. I do really hope that there is no similar degeneration in the United States because democracy, I possibly an optimist, but democracy always has any kind of antibody reaction, like antibiotics. So this is the difference with the authoritarian regime from my point of view.
Well, as we were talking about before we started recording, I feel like it's really no comparison what's happening in Iran with what's happening in the United States, except I want to amend that statement because what we're seeing right now is states are, well, really the federal government, the president, they're just disregarding some of what some courts order. Okay, there are court orders and they're just going ahead and doing what they want to do, not on executions. However, they've got a different way of limiting what you can do to defend yourself. It's all about show and tell and the and the optics of it, which is even that is very smelly. But we have a problem here in the United States with something called procedural bars. Now, I'm not an attorney, and somebody else could probably explain this better than I. But essentially, if you get to a certain point in your legal process, which here it's sometimes as much as, well, the man that is about to be executed, I think, has been in Florida on Thursday, has been on death row for 42 years. Okay. A better example is one that was executed recently. He'd been there for a long time, but they had new evidence and they could not look at it because they'd already passed the deadline for bringing new evidence in. They call it procedurally barred. So even as happened several years ago now in 2023 in Texas, there was a man whose attorneys found evidence that he might have been innocent. And it didn't matter because it was too late to raise the evidence. The new evidence was procedurally barred. The man that's pictured right here over my shoulder here, Marcellus Williams in Kansas, had evidence that he was on a plane in another state when the crime was committed, and it was too late to bring that evidence. There was another case also in 2023 where there was a man that came up with evidence that the jury foreperson was a racist and said things in a racist language about him because he was a black man, that during the deliberations of the jury, and when they discovered that, it was too late to bring it up and to have a hearing. And in the United States, we're supposed to be able to raise evidence. And, obviously that's nothing like what's happening in Iran and in other places where due process just doesn't exist. They already decide that you're guilty and what your sentence is going to be before you start the trial. It's all a show, right? And we're lucky if we even know what the charges are. I was looking at some of the information about the people who've been executed just in the last month or two in Iran. For some, we don't even know what the charges are. So it's night and day in terms of the information that's available. But as I was saying before, when it boils down to it, if it's your day, if you know they're coming for you, I think it's very, very similar what a person must be going through when they know that it's their time.
Thank you very much for this. So just that I have a personal question. Maybe if you don't want to answer, I will understand. So since you are fighting since so long time, you started in 1989, and I was a very little girl at that time. So did you sometimes lose your hope about the possibility to stop execution, or I don't know, one day you say, okay, I don't want to fight anymore because the situation is always the same. We are human after all. So there is a moment where you say to yourself, okay, my hope, I'm hopeless. I'm not sure that it can work. And I ask you that because, prisoners in Iran are fighting despite the situation they are living inside the prisons, inside the country, despite their family are at risk, and despite the situation of their same situation inside the prison can be even worse because of the movement. So, but they don't lose hope. They continue to fight. So that's why I'm asking you that question.
It's actually quite inspiring to me to know that there are prisoners fasting and trying to stop executions by their own political activism while they're in prison in Iran. I mean, and people are doing that knowing that they might be punished. That's so inspirational to me. I have to confess that it's, especially the way things are right now, it's very hard to have hope that the courts are going to do the right thing or that the lawyers are going to find the information that they need in time. Right now, if you get an execution date scheduled, it's very, very rare is not going to be carried out. Now, we just saw one. There was a man who was supposed to be executed last Thursday in Alabama, and his lawyers were successful in convincing the court to do an evaluation of his mental capacity to, is he healthy enough mentally to understand what's happening to him. And that conversation is happening right now also in the state of Utah with a man named Ralph Menzies, who we believe is in dementia. So there's hope in that regard. But in most cases, I expect that nothing is going to stop that particular execution. However, a part of what we have been very successful in doing in the movement in the United States has been in preventing a lot of death sentences by putting more resources up ahead with the lawyers at the time of the trial, and even before they go to trial to decide whether they're going to seek a death sentence. That is why we've been very successful, our movement, in reducing the number of new death sentences. But I must tell you, the first round number execution. So we've had 1,630 some executions in the United States since 1977. And when I came into this work in the late 1980s and started getting involved, we were in the 300s. The first round number execution that I can remember standing in protest outside the prison was when they killed a man named Flint Gregory Hunt in Maryland, which has abolished the death penalty. But back then, this was in 1996 or 1997, that was the 400. And now we're in the 1600s, which means that I've been present to this work and aware of these executions for more than 1,200 executions, okay? And if I was to take all of those to heart, there's no way I could do this work. And there are a lot of people that have just, had to stop doing this work because they get so personally involved and get close to the prisoners. And there's a few where I've gotten to know them, but in most cases, there isn't even time, and there's no way I could be writing to all these people. So that's where it feels a little bit hopeless. But I've also been a part of situations where we have stopped executions because people are innocent or for other reasons. And I've been a part of campaigns where we have actually abolished the death penalty in New Jersey and New Mexico and Illinois and Connecticut and Maryland and Nebraska and New Hampshire and Colorado and Virginia and Washington State and Delaware. I mentioned Nebraska. We did pass our bill there, and the governor vetoed it. We overrode the veto, and then the governor put his own money into putting it onto the ballot for an election. So they reversed that. They've had one execution there so far, but we've stopped executions in a number of places, and we've abolished the death penalty in a number of places. And I've been a part of those campaigns, and I must tell you that it is always a thrill. It's very exciting when you see them pass your bill or when you're a part of stopping an execution. And I do it as a public policy person and as a protester, as an organizer, as an activist. I see organizing is much more my role than being an activist. Activist is holding a sign. Organizing is figuring out how to put pressure on policymakers and getting them to change. Yeah. And my point is that it's slow. It's way too slow, but we can see the change. And my promise to you is that when Iran is able to shift its leadership, then maybe that's the time when Iran will stop executing people. And I know that that is very difficult to see, and it will probably take some sort of bloody revolution. Yeah, I don't know. And I just fear, actually, the president of the United States right now wants to be in the power and have the level of power that the Ayatollah has, or that they have in North Korea or in China. We have to stop that here, but the path that we're on right now is one towards where they might actually be able to put people in prison without evidence. But they already do that, But it's again, up until now, it's not very, very often that is political in its motivation, but that's coming, and it has happened in some cases. Anyway, all of this is to say, sometimes it feels hopeless. Certainly, I think the emotion that I feel more is anger and sadness than hopelessness, because at least we're standing up. And that's where I get my inspiration. And especially now that I've become a little bit closer to the campaign in Iran and recognizing that prisoners in prison are risking their own lives to fight the death penalty, that is so inspirational to me. And I want to tell people about that. I'm going to tell people about that, and encourage us to take hope from that. I mean, if they can do that, risking their lives to say, don't kill anymore, then there's a lot more that we could do.
Thank you very much for that. It's actually, they are an inspiration for everyone. I say that, and I repeat, I will never stop to repeat that since the start of that podcast. And the reason to carry on that podcast is exactly to amplify their voice. I recall that, to amplify their voice and don't just leave them alone inside the prisons, because if they can do it, yes, we can do it too. So thank you very much to be with us. Before to leave, we used to ask to our guest to send a direct message to prisoners in Iran. Doesn't matter, whatever you feel, please.
Well, first, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be with you. And I also want to invite people to come to visit our webpage and our social media for Death Penalty Action, because we invite people all around the world to help us fight executions here in the United States. We have about 10 or 11 already scheduled this year, and there will be more. There's one Thursday night in Florida, and we're on an increase. So I invite you to join us and help us in the United States, even as much as we're all concerned about what's happening in Iran. So there's that. And then, a couple of years ago, I was at a conference in New Orleans with people from other parts of the world about innocence and wrongful conviction. And one of them made this for me. Grab it. And this, I don't know. I mean, it's. I think it's Japanese characters, and what they mean is persistence and hope.
No, I think it's Chinese, actually. It's Chinese.
Well, I can't be sure myself, and I'm embarrassed about that. But I will say that what I wrote down, what they said, it means persistence and hope, and I share that with you because when it comes to the people that I know who have survived time on death row, whether they're guilty or innocent, when I think about it myself, I can't imagine living in prison that way, that long, and just not giving up myself and taking care of things myself, if you know what I mean. And I know so many people that have survived dozens of years and then come out, and they have spirit, and they have love, and they have forgiveness, and they have life in them. And I always take heart from that, because I know if they can have life and love and persistence and hope and believe in a better future, then how can I not?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that message. I'm sure they will receive it in gratefully. And we were proud to have you. So before to conclude our 8th episode, I would just to, if possible, add any additional bad information about the situation of execution in Iran. On the basis of reports we had, among July and August, we had at least 169 executions, at least. So, and doesn't matter the supposed charge of each executed person. Many of them, of course, for any kind of attack on Earth. And I would also like, I already mentioned, but I really want to do again, that very recently, last week on 16 August, if I'm right, Sharifeh Mohammadi has been confirmed sentenced, her sentence, sorry, to death has been confirmed by the Supreme Court, and she is an activist like you, Abram, like me. She's a person, she's a human being, she's the voice of workers in Iran, and she's risking her life just because she used her voice. So let me use that occasion also to recall upon the attention of the international community about the very imminent risk of life of Sharifeh at the moment. And I recall the campaign that also Amnesty International is carrying on over the special situation of Sharifeh. And the other thing I would like to add today is that it seems impossible to do something until we don't start to try to do the impossible. That's the point. So thank you very much for joining us today, and my solidarity to people of Iran today and always. And last point, just before conclude, thank you for mention, Abraham, if I can say, the change of leadership and the importance of the change of leadership and the way to change leadership in Iran. So this movement is the foundation of the change. So let's trust on it and let's support that movement. See you next Tuesday.
Thank you.